Good evening. Welcome. My name is Josh Tarini with Medtronic Diabetes Canada, and it's my pleasure to be the host and moderator of our very first Facebook Live event at Medtronic Diabetes Canada. So, hello Facebook, welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about the user experience of the MiniMed 670G system, which was recently launched in Canada. This is the world's first self-adjusting insulin pump. What does that mean, you might ask? Well, it means that the system is capable of fully automating basal insulin delivery, whereby the system will make a decision every 5 minutes about how much or how little basal insulin to deliver to the user. Tonight, I have three special guests. Give the audience a wave. I'll introduce them in a moment. And we're really going to dig into the user experience of this system, which has just been launched in Canada in the last about 2.5 months. And we thought that tonight in a Facebook Live platform might be a fantastic way to do that. So given that this is a live experience tonight, we would encourage those online to send comments and questions. We will get to as many of those questions and comments as we can live on the air with my special guest tonight. For those that we don't get to talk about on air, absolutely we have some representatives from Medtronic who will respond in written fashion. And for those that you don't get a response on air or written during the program, we'll be responding thereafter. So please keep the feedback coming. We'd love to hear from you. We want to make this program tonight minutes together, and if you have to drop off early, that's absolutely fine. We're going to record this and it will be kept on both our Facebook page as well as our YouTube channel, and of course that's Medtronic Diabetes Canada. So tonight I'd like to introduce my guests and then we'll get rolling in a moment. So I have Charlie on my left. Paul also has been on the system for about the same amount of time. And on my furthest left, on your furthest right, we have Bryan. And Bryan is Paul's spouse, and he's going to speak to us not from someone living with type 1 perspective, but what it's been like to share that journey with type 1 diabetes and getting onto the MiniMed 670G system. The final thing I'll say before we start is just that you may have some technical questions about the system that we won't necessarily get to answer on the air tonight. So make sure if you're wanting to learn more about the product thereafter that you speak to your local Medtronic representative. So without further delay, why don't we get started? So Charlie, maybe you could share with the audience a little bit about yourself and your journey living with type 1 diabetes.
Sure. Was a long-haul truck driver when I was first diagnosed, and being on insulin, it's not legal to cross the border into the U.S. So prior to going on insulin, my doctors advised me to find a new career. Went on to insulin in 2009 and was multiple daily injections for a number of years and started on my first pump in 2017. And diagnosed in my 40s, and being told it was time to find a new career was a real eye-opener.
I can imagine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, very good. Thanks for sharing. So Paul, same question to you, a little bit for the audience about yourself, your journey with diabetes.
Hi everybody, I'm Paul Chalmers, also go by Riley. I've been diabetic since June 6, 2000, which coincidentally is actually my wedding anniversary, and the day I actually met Bryan as well. Again, I've been diabetic for 19 years, and of about 13, 14 of those years, I had Superman syndrome, which basically meant that I didn't have diabetes. I didn't take care of myself, didn't care to take care of myself. It was a burden. Turn myself around. I basically met a person on Facebook. I had diabetes burnout. I said I gave up. I didn't want anything to do with it. Nothing to do with diabetes. But I made one last stitch to put it out on Facebook saying that I'm done. And my guardian angel, actually, Riona. Hi, Riona. Completely. She's the one that got me on CGM, an insulin pump, she's the one that took me from giving 0 about diabetes to now giving 120% about diabetes. And now I take care of myself. I mean, this is probably the best time of my life, pretty much. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing. And being on the spouse side.
It's been a roller coaster at times. I was with Paul since he had his Superman syndrome, as he calls it, and through to now when he actually takes care of himself. And the biggest thing for me is just, being patient with, different ways that he might be feeling, because either his mental state is changed because his sugars have changed, right? And you don't really see those things, especially if you're not on a pump. You don't really know what's happening. So when he wasn't really taking care of himself, it was kind of turbulent at times, and you just don't know why. But, moving in with him through different pumps, and now the 670G, it's been and have a pump that helps him take care of himself. But now he has time to do projects. He can focus on other things and not just he's feeling sick today, or he has to use math to figure out how much food he's allowed to eat. Like it's just been a huge change to give him time back to himself, and I can see it and I can feel his weight being lifted. It's been awesome.
Oh, that's fantastic. It sounds like a ton more freedom for both of you.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is great. So Charlie, we actually have an audience question for you already.
Okay.
Someone's wondering what exactly you meant by not being able to cross the border being on insulin?
So yeah, there are if you're on insulin injection as a Canadian with a Class A license, you are not allowed to operate a tractor trailer across border. And the same applies for the Americans. They're not allowed to cross border. The reason is possibly because the blood sugar levels that Canada accepts might be different than what the US. I don't know exactly why it is. I just know that that's one of the restrictions.
Yeah, and certainly was the lead into a big career change for you. So
yeah, definitely.
Not a small thing to tackle, for sure. And Riona's online, Paul, and she says she loves you too. So moving along.
Not yet.
So moving along to the next step. So I know each of your journeys with type 1 diabetes has been very different. Maybe, Charlie, we'll go back to you. Could you share like a challenge or two for your diabetes that meant?
Yeah, my biggest problem was me. I was a bad diabetic, I guess, as far as textbook would go. The biggest problem was forgetting to bolus. So, I'd have a big breakfast and then I would, get ready and run out the door and go to work, and then a couple of hours later I'd be feeling the effects of it, and yeah, I would bolus for it, but by that time it's, I'm already climbing, skyrocketing. And then the same thing would happen in the afternoon, or it'd be exactly the opposite. And, instead of eating lunch at noon hour when I should have been, it would be 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the afternoon. My coworkers were like, gotta go eat. So it was my own bad self-management, and that led to super high highs and really low lows. I was tired all the time, especially at work. I'm falling asleep.
And Paul, from your perspective, similar, like I know that you said certainly you had this sort of Superman scenario happening, and definitely are throwing in a lot more to the diabetes than you were. Was there a specific big challenge or two that has been there for you with your diabetes?
So with my diabetes, basically what it was, that was a huge changing point, was about 2 or 3 years ago. I had actually 3 severe lows in a matter of 3 days, which paramedics had to be called for. So I hit 1.4, I believe, the first time, and
Down to 1.2 was the lowest.
1.2 was the lowest. And that's sort of when Bryan's viewpoint on diabetes also changed to sort of manage my diabetes.
Or help.
Or help. Because I saw the pain that he had to go through. So when I came around to it, the paramedics were standing there. And if you saw the look on Bryan's face, it was the scariest thing I think I've ever seen as a diabetic with a family member with it. And that's when I realized I sort of had to change. So basically taking control of my diabetes, managing it, you know, taking up the now 40 hours a week it now takes to manage your diabetes. A lifesaver. I now have time back. I remember last week, we sat down and usually we manage our diabetes, well, my diabetes together. I call it ours.
It kind of is.
Kind of is. But we would sit down, look at my graphs, compare them to what I ate. I don't need to because my numbers we know are in range and I don't have to stress 24/7 about what my numbers are. I don't pick up my insulin pump and go, oh, I'm at this number. It's now, okay, I'm at that number. I can trust the pump and let it do its own job.
Yeah, that's a big change for sure.
Yeah.
And so prior to going on the MiniMed 670G, Charlie, maybe I'll ask you this one first. What would you say was one thing that you were really excited about, but maybe one thing that you were also pretty apprehensive about?
Well, there was a lot of promotion on the system prior to Health Canada approval. So I and you know, I've tried a couple of different manufacturers' CGMs, and I wasn't really completely impressed with the accuracy of it. And I knew that in order for the 670G to be to perform the way that it's supposed to perform, it relies on the accuracy of the Guardian 3 sensor. So I was excited to jump on board, but at the same time wondering in the back of my mind, is this just another CGM like the rest of them? Happy to say I'm so impressed by it. It's crazy. I wear it proudly, and it's doing a great job.
And apprehensive about?
I was excited about having a pancreas back.
That's a big deal.
That's a big deal. I mean, without having one, well, I have one, but it's just laying there sort of not paying its rent. Your pump, you sort of don't. I remember, you know, hey, I ate 20 grams of carbs, but my sugar is this. Okay, let's lie to the system and sort of do it my way. I think it took me about a week to trust this system, and to be honest, I wore, you know, 2 different CGMs, and after the first week, tore one of the CGMs off, and I said, okay, I totally trust the Guardian Link because it's pretty accurate, actually. So trusting the pump is one thing that I feared greatly, and now I don't.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. And what were you excited about, or maybe a little scared of?
I was most excited for suspend on low, because obviously the story you just told about the lows, I mean, that's something that gave me the most anxiety about diabetes. I saw that. You know, we had talked about it before as, you know, this is something that could happen. So here's the sugar, and you know, if it go really low, here's the whole glucagon kit that you have to work with, which was terrifying to me. But, you know, the suspend on low made me feel a little bit better that they're actually really excited about. What I wasn't excited about is on his previous pump, I would get a transmission of numbers to my phone, and after the whole low situation, I was actually really hammering on getting those. I didn't know how I felt about not having that. So when Paul was talking earlier about, you know, we'd sit down, we'd go over his numbers, we'd literally look at his daily graph and see how much time he spent in range. Like, when did it deliver insulin, when did it suspend, and just kind of understanding how it worked. And then, like he said, I didn't need it anymore after a time period because he was spending so much time in range. He wasn't waking up in the middle of the night to huge alarms, you know. They happened sometimes, but not nearly as much as it used to. So that kind of got me over it. It took a little time. I'm skeptical. I have to, you know, see something before I believe it. And he was patient enough to take that time with me. After work, we'd sit down and go through the graph. But after a couple of weeks of doing that, it's like, okay, we're not seeing much different. You know, you're trying.
You had to learn how to trust the pump as well, as I did. And you did.
Over time. I mean, it takes a long time for something like that, especially when it comes to his health. So eventually we got there, and yeah, like he said, it's been weeks since we've really sat down and gone, we have to look at this. So it's been nice that way.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And Paul, you said it took you like even as little as a week to sort of start have some faith in the system?
So what it was for me is basically seeing the accuracy, because, you know, we always see the CGMs and accuracy sometimes could be really high, really low. It could be anywhere. But when you do your finger pokes and compare it to the Guardian Link, reads the exact same as your CGM. And no, you can't, but I mean, you get them, and it's fantastic. I mean, you sort of know that and can trust that your CGM is now reading the exact same numbers that your blood meter would read, and it's a pretty amazing feeling.
Yeah, it's not even so much the suspend on lows, because it's got that predictive aspect into it, right? So it'll stop the insulin delivery before you get to that point, so you don't get those low alarms in the middle of the night.
No, you sort of just coast right out of it now.
You know, take a little ride on, smooth right back out again.
Yeah. And both of you have even been a step beyond, really, in auto mode completely for approximately the last, would it be month-ish or a little 6 weeks, I think?
My date was January 26th, I think.
Okay.
Mine was January 7th, I believe. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Excellent. Yeah. So you know,
he's the expert.
only by a slim margin.
Yeah. It's a race, apparently.
No, that's excellent. So we actually have another question from the audience for Paul and Charlie. So when you're in auto mode, sometimes the system will ask the audience learns a little bit. So, you know, if the basal delivery has been on the high side for about 4 hours or on the lower side for 2.5 hours, there are safety mechanisms built in whereby it'll prompt the user and say, I need a little information to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So the question is really, what's your experience with those requests, and do they happen at a reasonable amount, and are they easy to, you know, put in and keep going?
It's pretty easy. I mean, you get them every now and again, and
it's kind of like, hey, are you still there?
Yeah.
That's basically what it's asking.
Never really saw the rewards of doing it. Poke your finger, enter your number on the CGM. Okay, fine. Now it's, hey, poke your finger, then your CGM reads it, and now you're back in auto mode. And I mean, you don't do anything in auto mode.
And if you don't eat like an entire box of pizza, you don't really get to that point where you run 4 hours of constant basal. So.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. And so you've probably alluded to a little bit this already, but in terms of that first little bit when you were not only on the system but in auto mode, I know you talked about trusting the system. Were there any other learnings or challenges that you were able to overcome at the beginning that might be helpful for viewers?
100% agree.
What your nurses have told you in the last, for me, 20 years, you know, your time, is you're always told to pre-bolus before your meals, and we never do it. We never do it. It's, no. But now with the system, to make it work and function correctly, you do have to pre-bolus. 20 minutes before, even 15. Yeah. Just give yourself the quick little shot, or type it in your pump, and you're good to go.
And the results are very rewarding because it keeps you in range.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't get those skyrocketing peaks.
Yeah. No. That was maybe a learning or anything, a little growing pain that he hasn't mentioned already?
Be gentle.
A growing pain. Working the new, like how to put the sensor on. I remember how to work that. It was different than your previous one, so we went through a little bit. worked a lot like in the manual mode, like his previous ones already. So that experience was kind of the same. It is really when we got to auto mode that I think just kind of letting go and not, you know, sitting there and hawk-eye watching it. Like he was taking on projects.
I was doing the dishes.
You did the dishes. Oh my God.
Yeah. Can you imagine?
It was wonderful. And so like something we were apprehensive about, like I covered that before, you know, just making sure that we're watching the numbers and we're something we're comfortable with. But I think the only one that really I saw was just learning how to use the new application.
And the other thing I think I forgot to mention too, almost to the point where I didn't want to go on this pump because of that, but as well as you know probably is that you're actually put in, like, you don't get kicked out, you're actually put into safe basal. So getting kicked I think is a very strong word that people are using, and it's actually just being put into safe basal to make sure that everything's being okay to get you back into auto mode. So I mean, don't be afraid of people say kicked, because it's not that scary at all.
Exited is a little more gentle, perhaps.
Helped
back in. Something like that. No, absolutely. So I guess in terms of your overall, helped you avoid lows more or highs more? Or if you had an A1C done yet that was substantially different than before, what would maybe Paul? We'll start with you.
For going, like, taking care of myself, I'm already predicted at going at a 6.5 because it will actually give you the predicted A1C on it. I mean, that's
significant.
That's significant right there.
Yeah, you got to feel pretty proud about that.
I do, and it's almost holding back tears right now. I don't mean to be that guy, but I mean, to go from 14, where, you know, all those bad things are going to happen to you, to going to 6.5. I mean, I never thought 6 would be a number on my A1C, to be honest. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, fantastic.
For anybody that isn't aware, like 5.5 would be a normal number. That's one that we like to quote. Yeah, he's a 5.5. For me, over my journey, I think maybe one time I dropped below 8.0 to like 7.9, and then right back up again. So now with the reports from Medtronic CareLink, I'm seeing a predictive A1C of under 7, like 6.5 to 6.9, which that's a really huge accomplishment for me. And you know what? I'm contributing to it, but the pump is really helping to put me there. And it's challenging me to be a better diabetic than I have in the past. And I haven't gone for an A1C yet.
What was your time in range?
About 70%.
And I'm at 95% in range.
Yeah, and then
so,
beforehand I was.
What time in range is basically at 4 to 10. It will take your 24-hour block and tell you a percentage of how much time you spent actually in range. I know one day, I've never done this before, but I think my 6th day into auto mode, I actually achieved 100% in range.
Wow.
And that's unheard of.
Absolutely crazy.
Especially for my diabetes.
Yeah.
And so right now I'm at 95% in range, and that's no thanks to me. It's pretty much all thanks to the pump. Let my best friend do the work now.
That's great.
And what would you say the things, we've talked a little bit about pre-bolusing and trust. I think that's probably virtually impossible to achieve. But to get a great time in range, are there any other drivers? So I know that you're giving a lot of credit to the system, but I would say that you have to be influencing that. So are there other things that you're really diligent about that really make that happen while you're in auto mode?
While I'm in auto mode, just basically when it's asking me for a blood glucose, I'm doing that. Pre-bolusing, I mean, there's not really much more work than that. It's pretty easy and simple. I mean, I'm even looking for things for maybe if Charlie can say, but I'm like, I don't think there's anything else that we have to do to keep ourselves in that range.
No, now, for the last 3 or 4 weeks, her and I have been in communication like weekly, and she's looking at my reports and tweaking my settings, whereas before we did. Now, week by week, we can look at it and she can tweak it and really fine tune it. So I think that's my time in range number is starting to come up. Initially, when I first went into automotive, it was like less than 50%. So now that it's at 70, I'm moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And just to think, before you only had 12 preset basals that you went off of, now you have 288 preset basals. And it's basically making diabetes all about me now. Whereas before it was, how do you fit into the mold?
Yeah.
It's not that way anymore. It's how does it fit into Paul's mold now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have another audience question. So they're wondering, for those of you that were on the 630G before the 670, and if you weren't on the 630G, maybe you could just comment on accuracy, which you sort of did earlier already, Paul, but if there's anything else to add. Charlie, do you wanna?
I was on the 630G, and yeah, I didn't trust the accuracy of the CGM I was using, to the point where I stopped using them. It wasn't a necessary component with that pump. I relied on my finger pokes all the time. Night and day. The difference is night and day. So now with the Guardian 3, I trust it. I know you're not supposed to, but I've actually bolused off of the reading of my CGM because it's that accurate. I trust it 100%.
All right, just for our viewers, that's
yeah, that's not
different brand. And from accuracy, I'm going to go back to what I said before is, the first week of wearing this, I wore both because we don't trust what we're wearing half the time. And I know people at home.
especially if it's new.
Especially if it's new.
Yeah.
We don't know what it does, and so I wore them both and I would finger poke and I would say, hey, this one's at a 4.8, this one's at a 6.3, and I'm at a 6.3. Wow, okay. So I think even before the week was over, I think maybe day 5, I just basically went behind, ripped it off, and
Like, it doesn't come up in conversation that often, but I heard it a lot that week.
I think
All
it's,
right, all right.
hey, I got a unicorn.
Yeah, texting it, calling it, all of it.
Hey, that's good news, I'd say.
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. We have another question from a viewer. So I think both of you actually have mentioned the concept of pre-bolusing. So the audience was wondering if you could explain what exactly you mean by that, for those of them who aren't sure.
So pre-bolusing is basically somebody brings out a plate of food right here, or you're at a buffet, and you're going to
Sushi buffet?
grams of carbs. Okay. 20 minutes before that, you're just going to program it into your pump that you're, and this is the time that if you're at a restaurant or anything that you'd be, looking at the menu saying, okay, I'm going to have a burger or the sushi, and then you're plugging it into your pump already. Could have that second slice. If I'm not sure I'm going to have that second slice, I'll just program in the first one, and then when I'm ready to have the second slice is when I'll program in the second one there for you.
Yeah. Excellent. And knowing that to bolus for food on the MiniMed 670G in auto mode, you'd need to enter carbs. Would either of you say that you have really tried to be a little bit more rigorous for your carb counting, or have you actually just sort of carried on with what you were doing before?
I'm probably doing a better job now than before, because now to me it means something. So before I just punch in whatever. And the other thing too is I was always worried before about going too low, because my be low to the point where I'm involved in an accident. They treat you as if you were impaired. And once you lose your license for that reason, it's pretty difficult to get back. So I automatically kept myself high. I under-bolused all the time. And now, pre-bolusing, being more accurate with my carb counting, making sure my bolus amounts are address the carb intake, is keeping me not flatline, but pretty darn close.
Yeah.
But even think, so if you're messing up on your carb counting, this system's sort of designed to help you sort of go up a tiny bit and then bring you right back down into range. It's almost like the world's worst roller coaster. Even if you're not the best carb counter or you are the best carb counter, you're still gonna succeed, really.
Yeah.
So earlier, Charlie, you mentioned your numbers and that sort of thing. So maybe you could share with the viewers, you know, do you look at CareLink with any regularity, and what's been a helpful or motivating thing for someone who is new or not new to going in auto mode?
I've been checking my numbers on CareLink for usually on a weekly basis since I went on. The best thing about it, like, there's new reports on there that are specifically for the 670G, and one of the greatest ones is that you can do a side-by-side comparison of from back whenever until now, right? So you can look at the first week of March versus the first week of January and do a side-by-side comparison, and you can see, you know, in a graph and the numbers, how much better, how much the best.
Oh, excellent.
And with me, actually, I like knowing what my carb ratio is for like different meals and knowing that that's right on.
Yeah.
And actually in the CareLink, it gives you a cool report that puts all your meals between then. It sort of gives you a graph to see if you're actually giving yourself too much carbs or not enough carbs. That's my favorite thing, but also too the reward of this pump. I mean, seeing that predictive A1C and knowing that it's pretty much right dead smack on, those are probably my two favorite parts of the CareLink report there.
Yeah. It's worth sticking to it and kind of getting to know them a little bit and looking for those helpful tidbits.
Absolutely.
I would actually say it's not even that overwhelming anymore.
See it just being from an outside perspective.
Yeah.
So when I have a look at his CareLink, I can look and think, oh, that's how many times suspend on basal happened, or like all of the different things. He was actually surprised how much I picked up just from looking at the screen. So the graphs, you know, if you look at them as a whole, can look intimidating, but if you take the time to read and understand what they're trying to display, it's not too bad. You just got to focus on each one individually.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. So I know that you've only each been on auto mode, for example, for a little over a month, maybe 6 weeks. Would you say that it's already starting to giving you enough freedom to say do different activities that you might not have done before? So I think, Paul, if I remember, you're a snowboarder. Is that right? So
that is right.
Has this helped open any of those doors for the things in your life that you love?
Before I would be up on the slopes and I'd be like, what do I need to do to get myself in range? Should I maybe go back to the lodge and just say, let's not do the afternoon? Now I don't have to worry about that because, I mean, it's going to suspend me before I go low. I mean, I always carry something with me just to make sure, but nowadays I don't have to worry about activity. I don't have to do anything. And plus, too, the preset basal amount, I believe it is.
Oh,
the temp basal amount, that can put me up to 8.3.
Yeah.
I usually target, and while I'm doing activity, that's perfect for me.
Yeah, and would you set that temp target a little before you start to do the activity, so it's kind of already allowing you to gradually get up there a little bit?
Just like pre-bolusing, I'd probably do it 20 to 30 minutes beforehand. It's a perfect thing to do.
Wonderful. And what about you, Charlie? Has it opened any doors for you from an activity or life perspective?
It's actually taught me to be a little bit more careful. So I know that I go low when I walk. So I might go shy on my bolus at supper time if I'm planning to go for a walk afterwards. If I bolus the right amount so that I stay in range and then I go for a walk and I start, dipping, then the predictive low is going to stop the insulin delivery, but I can avoid that by just cutting back on what my bolus amount would be. Last speaking, Connected in Motion Adventure Team, we were on a hike in Alberta for about 7 days and hiked through the Alberta Rockies. And that whole time, everybody was like checking their blood glucose all the time.
You saw pumps in hands all the time.
Yeah,
trying to
and
find out.
if the 670 had been available then, let's just go back in time and take this pump with me. You know, quick glance at the screen with the the shield there with your blood glucose number would have been something that would have been great to have. It would have prevented me from doing all the finger pokes.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. Well, I'd like to thank the audience. We're gonna do a few more questions. We have a lot of audience questions coming in, so thank you for those. The next sensors even more worth it for you from what you might have done before?
Absolutely, 100% without a doubt.
Because before with other CGMs, you never saw the reward. You always got, hey, do this and good job on those numbers, and nothing ever happens.
Yeah.
But with actually seeing the reward of staying with that blue shield on your screen, I mean, buying the sensors now is, why wouldn't you? Because you always want to make sure that you're in auto mode, because I have time back. I mean,
yeah,
it's amazing.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. And so just before we wrap up, there any other stories, tidbits, pearls to wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience? Either could be a recommendation, a suggestion, or just something else great of your experience that we haven't talked about yet.
Media with Diabetes Canada, Connected in Motion, Medtronic, a lot of the healthcare manufacturers are bringing it to the public light. And I realize, of course, that CGMs can be cost prohibitive for a lot of people, which I would take that as an opportunity to step up your advocacy, and let's go after the government and see if we can get more public funding for this kind of stuff. And I think the more people that do experience the 670 pump with the Guardian providers will get on board, and hopefully we can get the attention of the federal government, provincial government, and help people out that are not fortunate enough to have insurance.
Your best friend that takes care of your diabetes for you. I mean, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
There's no other pump on the market that does this, and it makes your life so much easier. You get time back, friends back, you get your life back. So I would personally recommend everybody to try it. Mm-hmm. I'm not a paid spokesman for Medtronic, but this is just my experience. I mean, honestly, my job loves that I have it now. I don't have to worry about much anymore. It's just, I'm Paul again. I'm back to myself.
I mean, as an outsider, again, be skeptical. If you think you're going to be going on it, obviously try it, but be as skeptical as I was, and really run yourself against the numbers that the CGM's putting out, and what you're testing, and those unicorns that can come out. Because it's true. Like, I don't convince very easily, so the fact that he took the time to sit down with me for weeks on end, it did prove that in the end it was a really good choice for us to go on that, because again, not only did I see the numbers are good, and numbers are good, but you see the residual effects of like he was doing before. So if you're gonna try it, and I encourage you to be as skeptical as you can on what be convinced in the end.
No, it's great encouragement. So we have a question about the Blue Shield. I'm wondering, I don't know if the cameras can pick this up, but do you guys mind showing your pumps, and maybe one of you could share with the audience what exactly this Blue Shield is?
I'm at 5.0. So this Blue Shield right here, basically what it is it's basically taking care of your diabetes. So diabetes is blue, the Blue Shield is there, and what it's meaning is that you're in auto mode. So it's going to deliver you extra basal when you're going high, suspend your basal before you go low, and when you have the So auto mode is basically the blue shield there, and it's awesome.
Yeah.
I remember actually, a funny story is we're back there talking, and I'm like, oh, my screen's all scratched, and the Medtronic rep goes to me and says, oh, you can just trade that in. I'm like, no, I don't want to be a manual mode again. No, not doing that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you for sharing. So, of course, when you're in auto mode, like they said, there's going to be a blue shield. Your sensor glucose will be in the middle of that shield. You'll also see some trend arrows sometimes to show you that if you're trending upwards or downwards, or maybe you're pretty stable. So we, when we're teaching the system, we always encourage people to look down at their system and say, do I see a blue shield? And if so, you know that the system's automating as it should in auto.
It's there. Wake up in the morning and you hit that button and it shows a straight line while you've been sleeping. It's like, oh, wow.
And you can also see all the pink dots of where it was giving you insulin and all the blanks where it's not. So
Were you?
Yeah, I mean, I was grateful. Even my diabetes educator said, I knew you would catch on quick, but there's nothing difficult to it. It's so simple to operate.
So simple, Charlie can even operate.
Exactly, there you go.
Wonderful. Well, any other final thoughts for the audience before we wrap up, guys?
No, I mean, the only thing that I would say is in my personal life, like, I'm not as flexible as I may have been 40 years ago. So I wear my CGM on my arm now. Before I used to put it on my abdomen so that I could tape it on. So this is, one-handed, I can't do it. I have to get my wife or my daughter to give me a hand to put the tape on. Otherwise, I just mess up the tape.
And the tape's so much better.
Yeah, the tape is great. That's one of the great innovations. Has stimulated some conversation, like, does that hurt? When we talk about it, is it working better? So, bringing them involved, getting them involved to ask me questions about the diabetes, about the care. I introduced them to my, glucagon pen. This is what you have to do if something weird happens. But I'm not worried about that anymore, because with 630, I'm not going to get to the point where somebody has to find me on the floor and stab me with a pen. So, yeah.
With me, I would just say give it a try. I know, before everybody said that Medtronic sort of had a bad rap. Nurses are fantastic that work here, and your system is absolutely fantastic. So
you like it?
I love it.
Yeah.
And the CGM is one thing that sort of turned me off, but honestly, give it a try. It's not the same CGM that you guys had before. It's now actually works.
Oops. All right.
Sorry, Medtronic.
And last but not least, skeptic Bryan, any final tidbits for the audience?
Final tidbits. If you're living with someone with diabetes and you don't have it, pay attention, get involved. If you're, say they're going on the 670, go with that person or your loved one to the meeting where it happens. I did that with Paul when he went on to his meeting to turn on auto mode, and the rep Riona took as much time with me with my questions, and I have a lot, as she did with Paul. So it was that attention to detail that Medtronic gave to me, not just the patient, but the ones who have to live with them and want to live with them. Sorry, not have to.
Some days.
Yeah. It made me feel a lot better. It helped usher my transition into that. So, get involved with a community of people if you can, like Paul has in the past, and get involved with the reps as well, and ask questions and understand the pump at least to a degree where you're comfortable with what settings it's throwing out and what you can do to help if something's low or high. You know what you can.
I think the feedback online has been wonderful so far. So thank you for sharing your experience, both living with type 1 diabetes and living also with someone with type 1 diabetes and the MiniMed 670G system. So just a couple quick tidbits before we wrap up. So if those of you online are looking for more information, I would encourage you to visit our website. If you're wondering about coverage for CGM, for example, you can call our 1-800 number, which is 1-800-284-4416, or you can go to any of our social channels. So that's Instagram, that's Facebook. We're definitely going to have more Facebook Live events to come. In fact, it's going to be a week from Saturday. So not this Saturday. Event. We're going to go live in French at 11 o'clock and 1 p.m. in English. So definitely tune in for one or both of those if you're interested. And as always, we really want feedback about what part of this was helpful, what topics or discussion points would be fantastic to have in future sessions, because you know, these are for you guys at home, and we want to make sure that the education and learning is as valuable as possible. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And thank you to the viewers, and keep the comments and questions coming. And just a big thank you all around, and good night.
Thanks,